I never imagined my life would end like this, alone, in a darkened observatory at the edge of the Colorado wilderness, hunted not by men, but by something far more patient, more intelligent, more ancient. My name is Charles Emery Langston. I was a lead astrophysicist with the James Webb Deep Field Analysis Team, stationed at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. For over a decade, my career revolved around deciphering faint signatures of light from the most distant corners of the universe. My passion was the stars. My obsession was truth, and 3 months ago, I found it. Not all of it, of course, just enough to wish I hadn't. It began on the night of April the 13th, 2025, a Thursday. I remember the date precisely because it was my birthday, and I had chosen to spend it alone at the lab, poring over the latest batch of data from the near-infrared spectrograph. Most of the team had left early, save for Evelyn Carter, our resident engineer, and arguably the most brilliant person I have ever known. She left me a stale cupcake and a card signed with an equation she knew I would appreciate, the Schwarzschild radius formula, modified to resemble a heart. I still carry it. That night, I was focused on a narrow-band deep field scan we had scheduled near the galactic bulge, right at the outer edge of the Milky Way. We weren't expecting anything out of the ordinary, just more of the faint galactic clutter that tends to accumulate in low-gravity halo zones. But the signal we received wasn't noise. It was structure, repeating, geometric, coherent, impossible. At first I assumed a glitch, maybe a calibration fault in one of the mid-infrared detectors. But the pattern held. It was faint but persistent, a symmetrical array of radiative points, evenly spaced across nearly 2 light-years of empty space, positioned almost perpendicular to the galactic plane. There was nothing natural about it. Stars do not align in perfect hexagonal symmetry. Dust clouds do not emit harmonic wave sequences across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. But this thing did. I logged the anomaly and ran it through our automated filter system. The algorithm flagged it as unclassified high confidence. In other words, it wasn't noise, and it wasn't any known astronomical object. My hands trembled as I initiated the deep pattern recognition subroutine, a program we only used when hunting theoretical megastructures, Dyson spheres, O'Neill cylinders, and the like. Results returned within 6 minutes. The probability that the object was artificial, 83.7%. Location, roughly 28,000 light-years from Earth, just past the galactic core. Estimated size, 4 times the diameter of Saturn's orbit. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had a formal report drafted and encrypted. I sent it to our project director, a man named Henry Douglas. He responded with 3 words, "Come to Langley." That was it. No questions, no context, just an order. I arrived at the Langley Research Center in Virginia 2 days later, escorted by 2 plainclothes agents who refused to tell me their names. From the moment I stepped into the conference room, I realized I had stepped out of science and into something else entirely. The room was filled with people I didn't recognize, military uniforms, intelligence analysts, even a few foreign faces. Everyone looked tired, paranoid, angry. A woman in a dark gray suit introduced herself as Margaret Sloan. She didn't smile. "We've been expecting this," she said. "The object you found, we've been tracking its movement for over 6 months. Until now, we didn't know what it was heading toward." I remember blinking slowly. "It's moving?" "Yes," she said. "And its current trajectory brings it directly toward our solar system. Estimated arrival, approximately 7 months from now. Late November 2025. I felt my stomach twist. "And you didn't think to tell the public?" She leaned forward. "Dr. Langston, the public can't even handle viral misinformation. What do you think happens when we tell them there's a structure the size of a solar system heading toward Earth?" My heart pounded in my chest. "We don't even know if it's hostile." "No," she said, "but we do know it sent a message." She handed me a printed spectrograph and a sequence of numbers, binary, structured into prime number groupings, frequencies modulated along the hydrogen line, the classic hallmarks of intelligent communication. The signature matched the emission field of the James Webb anomaly. The message had been intercepted by the Very Large Array in New Mexico exactly 48 hours after we first imaged the structure. It wasn't a long message, but it was unmistakable. The translation read, "We are returning. Prepare your convergence." I asked Sloane what convergence meant. She didn't answer. For the next 3 weeks, I worked under full blackout protocol, deep in a sub-level beneath Langley. No phones, no networks. Every room swept for bugs twice a day. Our job was simple. Figure out what the structure was, where it came from, and what it wanted. And most importantly, why now? We called it Object 1. One of the analysts, a man named Kevin Tran, joked that it reminded him of a cosmic cathedral. Tall spires, glowing arches, symmetrical columns. But it wasn't religious architecture that scared us. It was the movement. The thing wasn't drifting. It wasn't being pulled by gravity. It was navigating, correcting, aligning, always toward us. And then everything changed. Exactly 22 days after the first image, at 0500 hours Eastern Time, the object stopped. The signal went dead. For 13 minutes and 42 seconds, it emitted nothing. No heat, no motion, no radiation. It was as if it had simply turned itself off. And then it pulsed, a single, blinding burst of light, visible across the spectrum. Every satellite orbiting Earth recorded it. Even the Hubble picked it up. But the message wasn't light. Not exactly. Embedded in the pulse were data packets, compressed layers of quantum noise that, when decoded, formed patterns, symbols, equations, star charts, and then something else, audio. Not human speech, not exactly, but something close. A synthetic voice speaking a language we shouldn't understand, and yet somehow did. I heard it once. I'll never forget it. It said, "Born of your dust, carved by your stars. We are the echo of your awakening. The gate is near. Let the architect in." That was the moment I knew we weren't dealing with distant travelers. We were dealing with something worse. They had been here before. They were coming home, and they wanted an invitation. I kept hearing that sentence in my head, "Let the architect in." It haunted me like a dream I couldn't wake from. We played that transmission on repeat for the next several days. The linguists argued over syntax while the military focused on tone. Some believed it was a command, others a request. But for me, it was something worse than either. It was a test. They were asking if we were ready to receive something we could not possibly understand. And some part of me feared we already had. The project team fractured after that. Some wanted to send a reply. Others believed we should do nothing. Henry Douglas, the man nominally in charge, said we should focus on defense, but against what? A megastructure that traveled across light years with more precision than any spacecraft we had ever built? It would be like throwing stones at a hurricane. Margaret Sloane said nothing during those meetings. She just watched us. 2 nights later, I found her alone in the surveillance room, staring at one of the decrypted symbols in the transmission. She didn't notice me at first. The screen displayed a black triangle, inscribed within a sphere, each vertex aligned with stars we had already mapped. She traced them slowly with her finger. "You know what that is?" she asked without turning around. I nodded. The Butez Void, the so-called Great Nothing, a region of space with almost no galaxies. Astronomers still don't know why it's so empty. She turned to me, and for the first time since I met her, she looked scared. "It's not empty," she said. "It's reserved." I didn't ask what she meant. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The next day, the anomaly resumed movement. This time, the acceleration was exponential, faster than anything we had modeled. All projections indicated it would reach the edge of our solar system within 6 weeks, not 7 months. Panic spread through the classified channels like a virus. Space Command moved to high alert. Secret briefings were held at every military base in the Western Hemisphere. And then came the global shutdowns. Every space agency across the planet reported unspecified operational delays. The European Space Agency, the Russian Roscosmos, even the Chinese National Space Administration, all silenced on the same day. Their telescopes went offline, their deep field arrays under maintenance. The cover-up had begun in earnest, but the public was already watching the skies. Astronomers started noticing something odd near the Oort cloud, subtle shifts in stellar parallax, tiny but persistent. The object was affecting local gravity wells. and amateur radio astronomers began picking up fragments of the signal, a low, oscillating frequency buried in the hydrogen line, always repeating the same sequence of prime numbers again and again and again. It was calling out, and the call was working. That's when the dream started. I was in my room at the Langley compound. It was around 0200 hours. I remember the precise time because I woke up without an alarm, bolt upright, heart racing. I had been dreaming of stars, or maybe something between them, an enormous structure floating in darkness, stretching like a spine across the galactic plane, humming with a resonance that made my bones ache. But it wasn't just a dream. My laptop, still connected to the internal network, had been recording audio. Somehow, it had captured the same low-frequency tone we'd been studying, the signal from Object 1, except this version wasn't external. It had been recorded from inside the room. I took the data straight to Evelyn Carter, who was stationed at the temporary observatory annex just outside the compound. She didn't laugh. She didn't even question it. She just ran the waveform through a Fourier analysis. The signal wasn't just repeating, it was responding. Every time I moved in my sleep, the frequency shifted. Every spike in my heart rate, every muscle twitch, every moment of REM, it all corresponded to tiny modulations in the signal's baseline. It had adapted to me, learned from me, tuned itself to my mind. What does that mean? I asked, terrified. She didn't answer for a long time. Then she said something I'll never forget. It's not sending a message, Charlie. It's reading one. From you. We stared at each other in silence, the reality setting in. The object wasn't just broadcasting, it was listening. And it had chosen me. I didn't sleep after that. For the next 36 hours, I ran every kind of test I could think of. Blood work, EEG, ECG, even a crude makeshift fMRI rig Evelyn built out of spare coils from the lab's medical station. Every test said the same thing. My brain activity had changed. Not drastically, just enough to matter. I was experiencing low-level theta bursts even while fully awake, spikes normally associated with lucid dreaming or deep meditation. But the patterns weren't natural. They matched the frequency modulations of Object 1. Not similar, identical, down to the nanosecond. I tried to tell Henry Douglas. He listened, nodded slowly, then quietly had me reassigned to a secure medical unit on sub-level 4. They called it an observation room, but the locks on the inside told a different story. For 3 days, I was monitored 24 hours a day. No windows, no electronics. Just me, my thoughts, and the dull hum of fluorescent lights. But even there, the dreams continued. Only now, I wasn't alone. In the dreams, I saw Earth from above, suspended in a field of dark matter strands, thin, shimmering fibers like silk in the wind. They weren't random. They formed a web, a lattice so vast I could feel the gravity of it in my chest. And in the center of it all, a shadow. Not absence, but potential. A negative shape carved perfectly into space itself, waiting. Then the voice returned. But this time, it spoke in English. You are the path. You are the map. We arrived through memory. I woke with blood in my nose, sweat clinging to my neck. My heart was racing. The guards outside didn't even flinch. They had been trained not to react, not to listen. I was released from that room 4 days later with a clean bill of health and a confidentiality agreement 20 pages long. Margaret Sloan personally handed me a sealed envelope and told me I was being transferred to Nevada. No explanation. Just a plane ticket and a set of coordinates that led to Groom Lake, better known to the public as Area 51. The transition was fast. One moment I was in the cold, white corridors of Langley, and the next I was under a desert sun, climbing down into a subterranean complex I didn't even know existed. I wasn't the only one there. Scientists, engineers, linguists, physicists from every corner of the country, hand-picked and flown in with zero notice. And at the heart of it all, buried beneath layers of reinforced concrete, was the real reason they had brought us here. It wasn't just the James Webb data. They had a piece of the structure. Not the one approaching Earth, that one was still months away, but another, much smaller fragment, recovered almost 7 decades earlier from a remote glacier in Greenland. It had been inert for all that time, cold, silent, unmoving, until 3 weeks ago, when the signal from Object 1 reached our system. The fragment lit up. It emitted the same harmonic pattern. It pulsed in sync with the Webb anomaly, and now, somehow, it had activated. And worse, someone had already tried to interface with it. I saw the footage. A man, mid-30s, thin, pale, seated before the artifact. He placed his hand against the surface. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then his eyes rolled back. He began speaking in binary, loud, precise, like a broadcast tower made of flesh. He kept repeating the same phrase, "The gate requires invitation. The architect awaits." And then he began to scream. Not from pain exactly, from joy. That's when I understood. This thing wasn't just technology. It was language, a message forged into matter. And whatever it wanted, it wasn't just coming. It had already arrived, inside us. After watching that footage, I asked for the man's name. They wouldn't give it to me. Compartmentalization, they said. Need-to-know basis. But I knew how to find it. Every piece of media generated inside the Groom Lake facility had a watermark, a faint rotating ID in the corner, almost invisible. I traced it to an internal patient record labeled simply Subject Delta 8. He had been a physicist, like me, had worked on the original Voyager communication protocols in the 1980s, retired in 2015, quiet, no family, recruited out of nowhere 6 months ago. The last line in his file chilled me. Subject experienced spontaneous cognitive realignment consistent with latent signal synchronization. Subject Delta 8 identified as early resonant prototype. Full integration, failed, collapse, irreversible. I stared at those words for a long time. They didn't say died. They said collapse. I asked Margaret Sloan about it during the next rotation. We were seated in the Level 7 operations chamber, reviewing newly decrypted schematics from Object 1. She looked tired, pale, like she hadn't slept in days. What happened to him? I asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. He heard the source, she said, unfiltered, before we had the dampeners in place, before we understood how deep the signal goes. How deep does it go? She looked at me, and for once her mask cracked. It's not just sound, Charles. It's resonance. Language encoded in physics. A structure that doesn't just occupy space, it modifies it. The signal isn't carried on electromagnetic waves. It's braided into space-time itself. That made my skin crawl. So it's not just speaking to us, I said slowly. It's rewriting us, she finished. We didn't speak after that. The following morning, the team received authorization to initiate direct interface testing with the Green Land fragment. They called it the Seed Gate, a name I hated immediately. It sat in a reinforced lab chamber behind 6 layers of glass and 36 biometric locks. Its surface looked like black obsidian, but when viewed from certain angles, you could see patterns shifting beneath the surface. Fractal geometry folding into itself, endlessly recursive. My assignment was simple. Sit in a room adjacent to it and dream. They wired my head with sensors, piped oxygen into the chamber, adjusted the temperature to near freezing, and then they turned off the lights. I lay there for what felt like hours, listening to the hum of machines and my own breathing. Nothing happened, and then something did. It started with vibration, not in the air, in my bones. A low-frequency tremor, like a tuning fork pressed against my spine. My teeth began to chatter, my muscles seized. But I wasn't afraid. I was calm, peaceful, and then I heard it again. Same voice as before, only clearer, closer. We remember you, Langston. You opened us once. You closed the gate. Now, open again. My eyes flew open. I was still in the room, still wired, still strapped down. But the fragment wasn't inert anymore. It was glowing, and on its surface my face stared back at me. Not a reflection, an imprint, like it had scanned me, stored me, and was waiting for me to finish something I had started long ago. Only I didn't remember ever beginning. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. The imprint of my own face on the fragment's surface faded within seconds, and when the observation team entered the chamber, they found nothing unusual. Heart rate elevated, brain waves spiked, but no physical change in the artifact. I was free to go, but I knew better. Something had changed inside me. That night, in the isolation bunk assigned to all interface participants, I did something I hadn't done since college. I drew. Not just idle doodles or fractals on the edge of my notebook. These were blueprints. Blueprints of places I had never seen. Structures made of angles that didn't obey Euclidean rules. Networks of corridors suspended in non-orbital rotation. Star charts with trajectories mapped in 5 dimensions. And always, at the center of each sketch, one recurring motif, the black triangle inside a circle. The same symbol embedded in the first transmission. It was as if my hand wasn't entirely my own, as if I were copying something, not imagining it, remembering it. I thought I was losing my mind, but when I showed the drawings to Evelyn the next day, she went silent. Not skeptical, not dismissive, just pale. Then she pulled out a folder from her own locker, one I had never seen before. It was filled with sketches nearly identical to mine. She had been seeing them too. "I started 2 weeks ago," she whispered, "right after I ran the harmonics on your sleep signal. At first it was just static in my dreams, then symbols, then maps. Maps to what? I don't know, but I did. They were maps to the edge of the Milky Way, to the location of the structure we had detected, to Object 1. Whatever it wasn't just heading toward us, it was guiding us, calling us back to it. And it had been doing so for longer than we realized. I asked Evelyn if she had told anyone else. She shook her head. They'd lock me in the med unit, like they did with you. We sat there for a long time in silence, surrounded by files, drawings, numbers we barely understood. Then I asked the question that had been festering in my mind since I left the James Webb analysis room in Maryland. What if the signal didn't just activate something out there? She frowned. What do you mean? What if it activated something down here? Her eyes widened. You think we're connected to it? I nodded. No, she said, almost too quickly. That's not possible. We'd know. There'd be signs. There have been signs, I said. For decades. We just didn't know how to read them. At that moment, the room lights dimmed. Emergency protocols engaged. Red strobes flickered. A siren echoed through the subterranean compound. We ran, down the corridor, into the command center, where the rest of the staff were already gathered. Margaret Sloan was standing at the main console, pale as chalk. Object 1 has changed trajectory, she said. It's no longer slowing. It's accelerating. Someone cursed under their breath. How fast? I asked. She looked at me. It'll reach the edge of our solar system in 9 days. Then she showed us the latest transmission. It wasn't a sequence of numbers. It was a phrase, repeated in perfect English, Chinese, Russian, Hindi, and 13 other terrestrial languages. The convergence begins. Prepare your species. One will awaken among you. And below it, a single name. My name, Charles Emery Langston. Silence fell across the command center. Dozens of eyes stared at the screen, then slowly turned to me. I felt the air compress, my lungs straining against the pressure of knowing, suddenly, that I had become something more than a scientist in a black project facility. I had become the variable. Margaret Sloan broke the silence. "Lock him down," she said. It wasn't a request. 2 security officers moved immediately. Evelyn stepped between us. "You don't understand," she said. "He hasn't done anything." Margaret's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The transmission named him. That structure, whatever it is, doesn't just know where we are. It knows who we are. That's a containment breach of the highest order. I didn't resist. I didn't have the energy. The message had drained me in a way I couldn't explain. Like the signal hadn't just spoken about me, but through me. They escorted me back to the medical sub-level, into a reinforced observation chamber. I was no stranger to its cold walls and the subtle hum of lead-lined insulation. The same room I'd been locked in after my first neural synchronization. Only this time, they didn't bother with monitoring equipment. They knew it wasn't a medical condition anymore. It was something else, something deeper. I don't know how long I stayed there. Hours, days. Time stopped having meaning once the lights dimmed and the clocks vanished. They fed me through a slot in the wall, left me to rot in silence. But the silence didn't last. On the 3rd night, or maybe the 13th, the room began to pulse. Not with light, with memory. I saw things I shouldn't have seen, places I've never been. A city floating above a gas giant, its towers built from translucent stone that shimmered with equations. a chamber of living glass, humming in resonance with music that had no sound. Beings, tall, indistinct, made of geometry and shadow, moving in perfect rhythm across dimensions. And one of them looked at me. It didn't speak. It pointed, and I understood. I was not the first. Earth had been visited before, touched, seeded, not with technology, but with potential. A long-forgotten protocol had been embedded in us, silent, genetic, waiting to be activated when the time was right. The structure wasn't coming for conquest or communication. It was coming to retrieve something, to collect it, and I was its beacon. I awoke on the floor, cold sweat soaking my shirt. The door to the chamber was open. 2 guards stood outside, unsure of how to look at me. Then Evelyn appeared. "You need to see this," she said, her voice hollow. I followed her up 3 levels, past a dozen checkpoints no one stopped me at. In the control room, the main screen displayed live telemetry from the James Webb telescope. It was no longer focused on Object 1, it was focused on Earth, more specifically, me. A satellite relay had triangulated the source of a returning harmonic pulse, one matching the frequency of the original signal. It wasn't coming from the anomaly. It was being transmitted from my cerebral cortex, a biological beacon, a subconscious reply. "I didn't send it," I whispered. "No," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "It was sent through you." Then the transmission updated again. A single sentence. "He is ready. I am ready." That was the message. But I didn't feel ready. I felt like a passenger in my own body, like something had moved in quietly, rewired the walls of my mind, and left a door open I could no longer close. And the worst part? Some part of me wanted it, craved it. I stared at the message on the screen for what felt like an eternity. "He is ready." Who was he, really? Me, or something inside me? Margaret Sloane stood a few feet behind me. I could feel her eyes on the back of my neck. For the first time since I had met her, she looked unsure. Not angry, not calculating, just overwhelmed. "You knew this might happen," I said quietly. She didn't answer. "You knew there was a risk." Her voice was hoarse. "We thought the signal might catalyze neural changes, behavioral shifts. But this," she motioned to the screen, "this is directed intelligence. The structure isn't just observing, it's interacting, using you as an intermediary." I turned to her. "You think I'm a threat?" "No," she said. "I think you're a conduit." That word again, conduit, the bridge, the interface, the invitation, the convergence, all the phrases we had seen repeated in the transmissions. They weren't metaphors, they were steps, a sequence, an activation protocol, and I was the switch. I left the room without speaking. No one tried to stop me. Evelyn followed. We walked together down the south corridor, past the sealed testing labs and deactivated scanners. The lights overhead flickered like they always did in that wing. No matter how many times engineering rewired the grid, that corridor never held stable power. We stopped in front of Lab 9. The seed gate fragment was inside, still cold, still glowing. I entered alone. It felt different now, like the room itself was smaller, pressed inward by the gravity of what we had uncovered. The fragment stood in the center, black, smooth, faintly luminous, but something had changed. Symbols moved across its surface, words I didn't recognize but somehow understood. Access granted, neural resonance stable, initiate alignment. I reached out, fingers hovering an inch from the stone. Then I heard Evelyn's voice behind me. "Don't." I froze. She stepped into the room. "If you touch it again, Charles, we won't get you back." I looked at her. She meant it. Her hands trembled. "I saw the new scan," she said. "Your neural patterns, they're not human anymore. Not fully. The frequencies in your brain are matching the structure's signal point for point. You're syncing with it." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because in that moment I realized something I had been avoiding for weeks. It wasn't just contacting me, it had been waiting for me. And now that it had found me, it wasn't going to wait any longer. I lowered my hand, not because I wanted to, but because some fragile part of my consciousness still belonged to this world, still recognized fear, doubt, identity. Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes locked on mine. "You feel it, don't you?" she asked. I nodded. It was no longer just in my mind. It was in my body. My cells hummed with low resonance, every heartbeat aligning with rhythms I didn't choose. And in the space between each breath, I felt it listening, watching, adjusting. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, the architecture returned. Curved corridors of impossible dimensions, machinery made of time itself, cities that spun on axes of thought and light. They were not dreams. They were memories, but not mine. The next morning, the Groom Lake Command Center received a signal, not from the James Webb Telescope, not from deep space, from orbit. The structure had arrived, 6 days early. It had entered our solar system at a speed no human instrument could track. One moment it was outside Neptune's orbit. The next it was parked in stationary position over Earth's North Pole, motionless, silent, eclipsing stars. And then it began broadcasting, directly into our atmosphere. No device captured it, but every mind did. Across the planet, people began hearing it, not in sound, but in meaning. In Indonesia, a farmer dropped his tools and began speaking in perfect Aramaic. In São Paulo, a 7-year-old girl described in detail the orbital mechanics of a black hole. In Kenya, an entire village collapsed into sleep at the same moment and awoke speaking the same phrase, "The gate is open." Within 6 hours, over 200 million people across the world reported identical visions. A triangle within a sphere, surrounded by stars that pulsed with numbers. And always, the same voice. Convergence begins. The emissary is ready. And when intelligence agencies analyzed the linguistic and psychic data from those events, they found something impossible. The frequency embedded in the shared visions matched my brain. Exactly. Not similar. Identical. The world had been contacted, and the message was me. That evening, the United Nations Security Council held an emergency session. Only 5 members knew the real context. Even fewer understood the stakes. By midnight, I had been formally designated as a potential vector threat and ordered into protective custody by Joint Task Force Command. But it was too late, because that night, the structure finally spoke to me directly, not through dreams, not through images, but in words. Simple, personal, and final. Charles Emery Langston, you were the one who closed the first gate. Now you will open the last. The voice didn't fade this time. It stayed, a constant hum beneath every thought, like a second heartbeat not tethered to flesh. It spoke with my voice, but it wasn't mine. It was something older, wiser, hungrier. I stood in the observation dome at Groom Lake, staring at the object in low Earth orbit. It hovered like a second moon, silent, unmoving, vast, no visible propulsion, no heat signatures, no entry flare through the atmosphere. It had simply arrived. The structure was unlike anything we had imagined. Not a ship, not a station. It looked like a sculpture made of shadow and starlight. 3 concentric rings rotating around a black triangle, suspended in nothing. Each ring moved independently, sometimes stopping, sometimes reversing, yet always returning to perfect symmetry. It didn't just exist in space, it reshaped it. Every sensor aimed at it gets corrupted, Evelyn said quietly beside me. Radiation readings collapse into 0. Time stamps glitch. We tried using neutrino mapping, but it folds space around itself, like it's anchoring here from somewhere else. It's not anchoring, I said. It's aligning. She looked at me, the weight of weeks behind her eyes. You believe it's what it says it is? I nodded slowly. I believe it's a gate. To where? I don't know. But I did know. To somewhere we had already been. I had spent the last 24 hours in isolation, sifting through every memory that didn't belong to me. They weren't dreams or hallucinations. They were flashbacks, echoes of a life not lived in this body, but encoded into it. I had stood at the edge of a great void once, not on Earth, but on another world, dead and bright, orbiting a star that didn't exist anymore. I had spoken the words, closed a door, sealed something in, and now it had found me again. The emissary, that's what the structure called me. The gatekeeper, the returner, and Earth was the final convergence point. At 0100 hours, the global signal began. Every electronic device on the planet powered on at the same moment. Phones, radios, computers, satellites, even ones disconnected from power grids. They all played the same voice. You are the fragments of the first mind. You were scattered. Now you are called. Gather, align, and awaken. Panic swept the globe. Governments initiated lockdowns. Satellites were redirected. Weapons were armed. But it didn't matter, because the message wasn't digital, it was biological. Human minds were receiving it directly, and some, too many, were responding. Margaret Sloan met me in the command chamber at dawn. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Over 12 million people entered synchronized sleep cycles last night, she said. Same visions, same coordinates, same word on every monitor. I didn't have to ask what the word was. I had seen it already, burned into the glass of my window when I woke up. Langston. I was no longer a person to them. I was a destination, a cipher, a portal. And unless I stopped it, I was about to become a door. They tried to keep me contained. They built a specialized room, lead-lined, signal-dampened, buried 6 stories below ground. Every wall was embedded with electromagnetic baffles, designed to scramble any outbound neural frequencies. I wasn't a prisoner, not exactly, but I wasn't free either. And still, the structure heard me. The signal didn't weaken, it grew. Every hour, new anomalies were reported, clusters of people falling into identical catatonic states across cities, their EEGs spiking with the same resonance signature. Mine. Electrical grids pulsed in harmonic patterns. Tides shifted by microdegrees. Atmospheric sensors picked up structured turbulence. Wind patterns repeating Fibonacci sequences. Even light itself bent subtly across the upper stratosphere, revealing interference lattices no one could explain. Earth wasn't being invaded. It was being tuned, aligned. The convergence wasn't just spiritual or symbolic. It was physical, a recalibration of this world to receive something that had been here before. And through it all, I remained the center. You're changing, Evelyn said during one of her unauthorized visits. Your cells, they're emitting a frequency. DNA replication rates have doubled in certain tissues. Your brain, it's generating structures we don't have names for. I looked at my hands. They were still mine, but sometimes I saw things between the fingers. Lines of light, shifting code, like my body was half invisible in the right angle. It's not a mutation, I whispered. It's a restoration. She didn't ask what I meant. I think she already knew. I hadn't been turned into something new. I was becoming something old, something ancient. At 0300 hours, I felt it happen. The real beginning. Every satellite in orbit shifted trajectory by a fraction of a degree, just enough to disrupt every communication system on Earth. Civilian satellites, military, commercial, weather, all of them, tilted, aligned, to one point. Me, Evelyn and I watched from the command platform as the sky itself seemed to flicker. Stars dimmed. The moon shimmered. High above, the structure changed shape for the first time. The 3 rings expanded outward, miles wide now, forming a triangle so vast it eclipsed parts of the upper atmosphere. Between them, the black triangle split open, revealing nothing. Not darkness, but absence. A cut in space, a wound in dimension, and through it, something looked back. Not a creature, not a being, but a concept, a presence, an intelligence vast and impersonal, old enough to remember the birth of galaxies and tired enough to want them back. I fell to my knees, not in fear, in recognition, because I remembered it too. From before this life, before Earth, before the fracture, the voice returned, not to my ears, but to my atoms. The gate remembers. The path is clear. Open and return. Margaret Sloan entered the room seconds later, armed. "Get away from him," she barked at Evelyn. "Now." Evelyn stepped in front of me. "Don't do this." "He's not human anymore," Margaret said, her eyes wet with fear. "You think this ends with some message of peace? That thing in orbit is a reclaimer. It's not coming to communicate. It's coming to take." I stood slowly, calmly. Not because I disagreed, but because I understood. She raised the weapon. I didn't flinch, because I saw what she couldn't. The weapon was already gone. Transformed, dissolved, folded out of phase. Margaret gasped, staring at her empty hands. The convergence had begun, not from orbit, not from space, but from me. The room vibrated, not with sound, but with geometry. The walls rippled in concentric rings, as if space itself had grown fluid. Screens flickered, instruments crashed, but I remained still, untouched, centered in a maelstrom of shifting laws. Gravity loosened, time bent, and through it all I could feel them watching, not with eyes, with intention, with memory. Margaret stumbled back, her breath shallow. "What are you?" The words echoed longer than they should have, stretching into a silence too large for the room. I didn't answer, because I didn't fully know, but I was becoming it. Whatever it was, whatever I had been before birth, before Earth, before the fracture, the structure above Earth, the gate, was no longer just orbiting. It was descending, slowly, elegantly. Each of its rings began projecting fields of light that sliced the sky in perfect arcs, bathing the planet in low, pulsing resonance. Cities stopped, oceans stilled, and from every corner of the world, the same phenomenon repeated. People falling into dreams, identical ones, shared ones, not dreams of fear or fire, but return, memories of other skies, other lives, and always, at the center of those visions, me, the emissary, the gatekeeper, the one who closed it once before, and now, the one tasked to open it again. Evelyn reached out, her hand trembling. "You don't have to go." I turned to her. "I never left." She didn't understand. How could she? This wasn't possession. This wasn't contact. This was remembering. I was the key not because I had been chosen, but because I had chosen this eons ago, in a form long dead, across a civilization no longer written in stars, but in echoes. The convergence was not about saving humanity. It was about completing it. Above us, the gate pulsed, once, and a line of light descended from its center. Not a beam, a bridge, one made of quantum lattice, resonating with my heartbeat. They had built it for me. Earth was no longer being tuned. It was being unshackled, uncoded, freed from the simulation of separation, from the illusion of time. Margaret screamed behind me, her mind fracturing against truths too large to hold. Guards collapsed in seizures, lights exploded, and I stepped into the light. My body dissolved, not in death but in migration. I became waveform, data, purpose, and then I was inside. Not inside the structure, inside them, their network, their archive, their truth. Millions of voices, not speaking but knowing. And in that knowing, I understood. Earth was never meant to be alone. We had been placed here, hidden, protected. But now, the seal had broken. And what was hidden was awakening. I wasn't floating, I wasn't falling, I was becoming. Inside the gate, time didn't flow. It radiated outward, inward, sideways, like a star collapsing into a thought. I existed across layers now, each version of me suspended in a different memory of the universe. Not just this one, others, the ones that came before, the ones that failed. I saw Earth, not just as it is, but as it was meant to be. Not a cradle of life, but a vault, a containment field built from biology, seeded with conscious agents to mature over epochs. Not by accident, by design. The structure, the gate, it wasn't a ship. It was a keyhole, and I was the key. Inside their network I saw them, the architects, not gods, not aliens, curators, civilization harvesters. They moved through galaxies like gardeners, planting potential, waiting for resonance, for convergence. Not every world succeeded. Most collapsed, fractured, became quiet, dead places, recycled back into stardust. But Earth had survived. By forgetting, by regressing, by evolving in isolation, sealed from cosmic memory, until now, until the signal was strong enough, until I was strong enough. In that space beyond time, I spoke with the others, not in language, but in understanding. They had names once, worn in other forms on other worlds, names like Amara, Telios, Von, names that felt like places. They welcomed me, showed me what I had done before, what I had chosen. I had been one of them once, a curator of thresholds, a closer of gates. In a dying system near the Triangulum galaxy, I had sealed a fracture, stopped a corrupted convergence, and in doing so I fractured myself, split my essence, sent it outward, into stasis, into forgetfulness, into Earth. My human life had been a cocoon. This was the emergence. I looked back. Earth shimmered below, vast and blue, encased now in a cradle of light from the gate. The atmosphere pulsed with coherent resonance. Humanity slept, not in death, in upload. Their minds were being copied, encoded, preserved. The architects had come not to erase, but to elevate, to archive what Earth had become, the best of it, the patterns that survived, and the worst would be left behind, erased. I didn't know if that meant war or salvation. All I knew was that choice had already been made, not by them, by me. Long before I was Charles Langston, long before I was born, I had opened this path, and now I would walk it to its end. The gate pulsed around me, each resonance wave carrying echoes of lives I had never lived, yet somehow remembered. Entire civilizations unfolded in a breath, coded into symbols that danced along membranes of space. I stood not in a room, but in a decision, one etched into the physics of the universe long before Earth cooled from molten rock. And at the center of it all was me. The convergence was nearly complete. Below, Earth had entered full harmonic alignment. The oceans glowed with lattice light. Forests hummed. Cities had gone still. Billions of minds suspended in patterned rest, awaiting the command signal. One word, one choice. I could feel it in the marrow of my being. The final phase. If I allowed the convergence to continue, humanity would awaken, different, upgraded, connected. Every thought part of a greater whole, no longer bound by the illusion of separation. Pain would vanish, lies would die, death would become obsolete, but so would freedom, individuality, everything that made us human. I asked them, the architects, if this was the only way. They answered without hesitation. You fractured to protect what could not evolve. Now you return to decide if it will. In their truth, I saw it all. I had closed the last gate not because the previous species had failed, but because they had passed too quickly into unity, lost themselves in the collective, became sterile, predictable, one mind, one will, one silence. Earth was the experiment, the variable, the wild gene, a species born of chaos, emotion, contradiction. And now, I had brought it full circle. Evelyn appeared beside me, not her body, but her memory, drawn into this space through my bond with her. She looked around in awe, terror, reverence. "This is what they are?" she asked. I nodded. "This is what you are?" I nodded again. "But are you still you?" The question hung in the silence. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. I turned back to the gate, to the aperture at its center. Inside it, I saw two futures. In one, Earth became something vast and timeless, a node in a network of eternal minds, without pain, without war, without individuality. In the other, the gate closed, the convergence ended. Humanity would go on, flawed and free, stumbling toward its own uncertain destiny. The light of the gate dimmed, waiting for my command. Two paths, two endings, no going back. And then I made my choice. Part 14. I stepped forward, not with feet, with intention. The gate shuddered in response, its massive rings pausing in their rotations, waiting, not as machines, but as witnesses. Across the surface of Earth, the convergence field flickered, pulsing in sync with my breath. The moment had come. One thought, one word, and everything would change. I closed my eyes and I remembered. Not just the stars, not just the old worlds, not just the forms I had worn before, but her, Evelyn, her voice, her questions, her stubborn refusal to surrender to awe, her insistence that mystery mattered, that wonder had value, that we were worth preserving, not for our perfection, but for our imperfection. And in that realization, I saw it clearly. The convergence was never meant to be imposed. It was meant to be earned, chosen. The architects didn't bring salvation. They offered reflection, and only those who remembered who they were before the unity could survive within it. I opened my eyes, and I said one word, wait. The gate froze, the rings halted, the light dimmed, Earth paused in the breath between futures. Then slowly the gate began to recede. Not retreat, not rejection, just delay, postponement. The convergence collapsed without violence. Minds returned to bodies, sleep ended, waves stilled, clouds resumed their drift, and I remained above, a tether, a sentinel, between two realms. The architects did not speak again. They didn't need to. They had placed their offer. I had answered, and now I was their echo. I watched Earth spin beneath me, flawed, brilliant, alive. Billions of minds unaware how close they had come to becoming something else, and I smiled. Because sometimes the highest form of evolution isn't ascension, it's restraint. I turned away from the gate, not to run, but to wait, until Earth was ready, truly ready. And when that day comes, I will open the last door, not as Charles Langston, not as the emissary, but as one of them and one of us.